I've been down here for about 3 hours now, and the building has gone completely quiet. There's something about working in the archive after everyone else has left. Not eerie exactly, just different. The fluorescent lights upstairs switch to their night, setting around 7. But down here we still have the old fixtures, the ones with the brass pulls and green glass shades. I keep 2 of them on, one at my desk and one on the table by the far wall where I've spread out the older ledgers. The room itself is narrow and longer than it is wide, with shelving units running along both sides. They're the old kind, heavy wood with metal brackets, and they smell faintly of linseed oil and dust no matter how often the cleaning crew comes through. Not an unpleasant smell, just particular. The kind of thing you'd notice if you were paying attention. I'm working through a set of records from the medical college, donation receipts mostly, spanning about 15 years in the early 20th century. They came to us in banker's boxes, the cardboard kind that are meant to look official. Someone before me, probably Margaret, based on the handwriting on the labels, had started to sort them by year but hadn't gotten very far. So tonight I'm just doing the basic work of getting them in order. Checking dates, making notes about condition. The ledger I'm looking at now is bound in dark green cloth, worn pale at the corners. The spine has started to separate from the binding just slightly, so I'm careful when I open it. Inside, the pages have that thickness that old paper sometimes has, almost soft under my fingers. The entries are in fountain pen, dark blue ink that's faded to something closer to gray in places. Someone's careful handwriting. Recording payments received, amounts, dates. $50 here, $25 there. Occasionally a larger sum, $200, $300, with a note beside it. In memory, but followed by a name. I copy the date range into my notes. September 1908 to December 1910. Make a note about the condition of the binding. Move on to the next one. The radiator along the wall clicks on, and I can hear water moving through the pipes. It's an old building, and the heating system makes itself known. Not loud exactly, just present. A low hiss, and then the gentle ticking of metal expanding. In a few minutes, the air will get noticeably warmer, and I'll probably take off my cardigan and drape it over the back of my chair. Outside, I can hear a car passing on the street, the sound muffled by the high, narrow windows near the ceiling. They're the kind of windows that show you ground level from down here. You can see the sidewalk, the bottom few feet of the building across the way, people's shoes and the wheels of passing cars. During the day, there's more to see, but at night, it's mostly just the reflection of the streetlight, and occasionally, the sweep of headlights. The next ledger is slightly larger, bound in brown leather that's dried and cracked along the edges. I open it carefully and find a different hand, more cramped, harder to read. The dates are earlier, 1903 to 1905. I have to hold the page closer to the light to make out some of the entries. There are columns for date, amount, donor name, and purpose. Most of the purposes are general, building fund, general operations. But occasionally, there's something more specific. Purchase of microscope. Library acquisition. Student relief fund. I write this information down in my notebook, which is nothing fancy. Just a standard composition book with a black and white speckled cover. My handwriting looks loose and casual next to the careful penmanship in these old records, but it's legible enough. That's all that matters for this kind of work. The lamp on my desk has a slight flicker to it that I've been meaning to mention to facilities, but it's not bad enough to really bother me. Just a very brief dimming every so often, almost like the bulb is considering something before deciding to continue. I've gotten used to it over the past few weeks. I reach for my water bottle and take a sip. It's room temperature by now, but that's fine. The building keeps the archive cool to protect the materials, but not so cold that it's uncomfortable. Just cool enough that I like having the long sleeves. The cardigan. There's a set of correspondence files next to the ledgers, and I pull the first folder toward me. It's stuffed with letters, some still in their envelopes, some loose. The paper quality varies. Some thin and brittle. I'm not reading them for content, really. Just sorting them by date. Checking that they're in decent condition. Making note of any that might need special treatment. The first letter is dated April 12th, 1909. Written on letterhead from a law office, downtown. The law office doesn't exist anymore. I know because I walked past the building last week. And it's a coffee shop now. Formal? The letter itself is a formal acknowledgement of a bequest. We write to inform you that the estate of Mrs. Eleanor Thorne has been settled, and per her instructions, a sum of $500 is to be directed to your institution for the purposes of... I skim the rest, make a note, move on. The next letter is more personal. Handwritten on plain paper. Harder to date at first glance, but there's a postmark on the envelope. June 1911. The handwriting slopes to the right, graceful loops and crosses. It's a thank you note, from what I can tell. I wanted to express my deepest gratitude for the assistance provided during my recent difficulties. I don't read further. That's not what I'm here for tonight. I just need to make sure it's filed correctly and note its condition. My back is starting to feel the chair, so I stand up and stretch a bit, reaching my arms over my head and rolling my shoulders back. The room is so quiet, I can hear my own breathing. I walk over to the table by the far wall where I've left some of the boxes I haven't gotten to yet and look at the labels. More records from the same period, different departments. I'll get to those tomorrow probably, or the next day. Back at my desk, I pick up the next folder. This one's thicker, packed with documents that look more official. Forms, mostly. Printed forms with blanks filled in by hand. Application for scholarship. There must be 50 of them in here, all from around the same year. I check a few of the dates. 1907, 1908. Each one has a name. An address. The handwriting varies wildly. Some confident and clear. Some hesitant and hard to read. I'm not supposed to get too caught up in reading these things, but sometimes a phrase catches your attention. My father passed last winter and left us without means. I'm eager to pursue my studies, but find myself in difficult circumstances. They're formal in the way people used to be formal, even when discussing hardship. There's a kind of dignity in the language that feels almost stiff to a modern eye, but probably didn't feel that way at the time. I make a note about the folder, date range, type of documents, quantity, and set it aside. The radiator has fully warmed up now, and the room feels comfortable. I do take off my cardigan and drape it over the chair like I thought I would. Underneath, I'm wearing an old gray sweater, soft from many washings. And that's enough now. I've been working in archives for about 8 years now. And there's a rhythm to this kind of work that I find genuinely satisfying. It's repetitive, yes, but not monotonous. There's always some small variation, some little detail that's different from the last folder or the last box. And there's something calming about the fact that this work has already been done before, in a way. These records exist. They're here. I'm not creating them or deciding what they should say. I'm just making sure they're organized, preserved, accessible. There's no performance to it, no one watching. Well, no one except the very occasional security guard who does a round through the building. But they rarely come down to the archive level. And if they do, they usually just wave through the small window in the door and keep moving. I pull the next ledger toward me. This one is smaller, almost pocket-sized, bound in red cloth that's faded to a dusty rose color. The pages are densely filled with notes in pencil, which is less common in these records. Pencil fades, smudges, can be erased. Most official records were kept in ink, but this one seems more like someone's personal notebook that ended up in the official files. The entries are brief and cryptic. Received J.H. Rhee. Matter of loan extension. Spoke with Committee Rhee. Building proposal. Letter to benefactors draft. It's hard to know what to make of it. And it's not really my job to interpret. I just note what it is, what condition it's in, what years it seems to cover. Someone else, maybe a researcher someday, will decide if it's important. I can hear the buildings settling around me, those sounds that old buildings make. A creak somewhere above, the hum of the ventilation system. Everything muffled and distant. During the day, this room is almost never truly quiet because you can hear people in the offices upstairs, footsteps in the hallway, voices. But at night, it's just the building itself, its systems and structures, making their small declarations of existence. I've got my notebook open beside me, and I've filled maybe 3 pages so far tonight with my notes. My handwriting gets a little looser as I go, a little less careful, but it's still readable. I note the red cloth ledger. It size an approximate date range. There's a stack of envelopes next to the correspondence folder, and I start going through them one by one. Most are empty. The letters have been removed and filed separately, but occasionally there's one that still contains its letter. When I find those, I check to make sure the letter matches the envelope, that they're from the same correspondence, and then I keep them together. The stamps are sometimes interesting in a casual way. Old denominations, old designs, 2 cents, 3 cents. Images of presidents, buildings, symbolic figures. None of them are particularly valuable. I know enough to recognize the rare ones, and these aren't those. But they're just nice to look at. Small pieces of design from another era. One envelope is addressed in a very shaky hand, and I wonder about the person who wrote it. Elderly, maybe, or ill. The letter inside is just as shaky, thanking the college for some kindness shown to a family member. Brief and formal, but you can sense the emotion underneath the formality. Your compassion during this difficult time has been a great comfort to us. I file it with the others and move on. My desk lamp illuminates a small circle of the workspace, and everything beyond that is in softer shadow. The overhead light fixture near the back of the room is on but not as bright, creating these gradations of light and shadow throughout the space. It feels almost theatrical. Not in a dramatic way, More like a painting, a still life or an interior scene. Something quiet and contained. I've brought a thermos of tea with me tonight, and I pour some into the small cup that doubles as the thermos lid. It's herbal tea, something with chamomile and mint, and it's still warm enough to be pleasant. I sip it slowly while I look at the next set of documents. These are more administrative. Reports to the board, summaries of activities, financial statements. They're typed on an old typewriter, the letters slightly uneven, some darker than others where the keys struck harder. There are occasional handwritten corrections in the margins, neat strikes through words and replacements written above them. One report details the installation of new equipment in the laboratories. 3 new microscopes purchased from the Spencer Lens Company. 2 dissection tables constructed by local carpenter. Additional glassware and instruments acquired from medical supply house. Everything itemized and accounted for. The cost of the microscopes was substantial for the time, $75 each. I note the report's date and basic content. These administrative records are less immediately interesting than the letters, but they're important for understanding the history of the institution, how it operated, what it prioritized, how it spent its money. The next folder contains what look like draft documents, yearly versions of letters or reports, with crossed-out passages and marginal notes. They're messier than the final versions, more human somehow. You can see the thought process, the revisions, the places where someone changed their mind about how to phrase something. One draft letter begins, "It is with great reluctance that we must inform you." And then that line is crossed out and replaced with, "We regret to inform you." A small change, but you can see someone thinking about tone, about how to deliver difficult news more gracefully. I'm not sure why these drafts were kept. Maybe they were just filed away with everything else, and no one thought to remove them. Or maybe someone thought they might be useful as reference. Either way, they're here now. I make note of them. The tea is helping keep me alert without being too stimulating. That's the nice thing about herbal tea this late. It's warm and comforting, but it won't keep me wired when I finally get home and want to sleep. I check my phone briefly to see the time. It's nearly 10 o'clock. I've been at this longer than I realized, but I'm not tired exactly. Just settled into the work. I could probably keep going for another hour or so before I need to pack up. There are more ledgers in the box at my feet, and I pull one out. This one's bound in black leather, more substantial than some of the others. The pages are edged in gilt that's worn away in places, and there's a ribbon bookmark sewn into the binding. Though it's so faded and fragile, I don't want to touch it much. Inside, the entries are meticulous. This was clearly kept by someone who took pride in their record keeping. Columns are perfectly straight, the handwriting consistent from page to page. Each entry notes a transaction, a date, names, amounts, and a brief description. Payment for coal delivery, winter term. Reimbursement for medical texts, library, salary, maintenance staff, March 1909. The sums feel small to modern eyes. $3 here, $7 there, but they represented real value at the time. Someone's wage for a week. Cost of heating the building through winter. The price of knowledge in the form of books. I copy the relevant information into my notes, then close the ledger carefully and set it aside. My hand is starting to cramp a little from writing, so I flex my fingers and shake out my wrist. These are the small physical realities of this kind of work. The strain of holding a pen for hours, the slight ache in your lower back from sitting, the dryness in your eyes from focusing on old handwriting and lamplight. The next folder contains what appear to be receipts, lots of them, bundled together with old string that's dry and brittle. I don't untie them. That's a job for when I'm fresher and can be more careful. But I note what they are and set the bundle aside to deal with later. Underneath the receipts is a leather portfolio, flat and tied closed with a leather cord that's still supple. I untie it carefully and open it to find what looks like architectural drawings or plans. They're on heavy paper that's yellowed at the edges, drawn in ink with careful attention to detail. Floor plans for a building, or maybe additions to an existing building. I can make out labels for rooms, laboratory, lecture hall, office, and dimensions noted in a careful hand. These are interesting enough that I spend a few moments actually looking at them rather than just cataloging them. The building they depict may or may not have ever been built. I'd have to check other records to know for sure. But someone put real thought into this design. You can see them imagining how the space would function, where people would move through it, how the rooms would relate to each other. I make a note about the drawings, describe them as best I can in a few sentences, then retie the portfolio and set it with the other items I've processed. The stack is growing. Everything I've looked at tonight, organized now, documented, ready to be properly filed into the archive system. It's satisfying in a quiet way, this visible progress. When I arrived tonight, there were just boxes of jumbled records. Now there's order, or at least the beginning of order. I hear footsteps in the hallway above me, muffled by the floor and distance. Probably security doing their rounds. The footsteps pass me, and the silence returns. I pour the last of my tea into the cup and sip it while I look at what's left to do tonight. There are still 3 or 4 folders I haven't touched, and 2 more ledgers. I could probably get through most of it before I leave, though I'm starting to feel the pleasant tiredness that comes at the end of a long evening of focused work. The next folder is thin, containing only a dozen or so pages. They appear to be meeting minutes, handwritten notes from committee meetings. Committee on Curriculum met March 3rd, 1910. Present. Doctors Harrison, Talbot. Discussion of proposed changes to second-year requirements. The notes go on to detail the conversation in a neutral, official tone. Who said what was decided, what actions were to be taken. There's something oddly intimate about reading meeting minutes from over a century ago. These were private conversations in their time, not meant for anyone beyond the participants, and maybe a few administrators. But now they're part of the historical record, available to anyone who takes the time to look. The people in these meetings are long dead. The issues they debated, resolved or made irrelevant by time, but their words remain, preserved in ink on paper. I note the date range of the minutes, the committees represented, and move on. The room has gotten just slightly warmer, enough that I'm comfortable in just my sweater. The radiator is still clicking occasionally, doing its work. Outside, I hear another car pass. Then nothing. I've always liked working late like this. During the day, there are interruptions. People stopping by with questions. The phone ringing. Colleagues wanting to chat. And that's fine. That's part of the job. But there's something special about these quiet evening hours, when I can just focus on the work itself without any of that. Just me, and the records, and the steady progression through the material. The next ledger is bound in brown cloth, worn smooth at the corners from handling. Inside, the pages are filled with lists, names, mostly, organized by year. It takes me a moment to realize these are student rolls. Lists of who was enrolled in various programs. The names march down the pages in neat columns. Some have notes beside them. Withdrew March 1911, completed program June 1909, transferred to surgical course. transferred to surgical course. Each name represents a person who lived, who studied, who presumably went on to some kind of life and career. Most of them are probably dead now by simple mathematics. These records are from 110, 120 years ago, but their names are here, recorded by someone who thought it was important to document who was present, who was learning, who was part of this institution in that moment. I note what the ledger contains and set it aside. My notes are getting less detailed now as I get more tired, but they're still adequate. Just the basics of what each item is and what condition it's in. There's a small wooden box in one of the cartons, and I lift it out carefully. It's light, maybe 6 inches square, with a hinged lid. I open it to find it full of index cards, each one typed with a name and some brief information. A card catalog of some kind, though for what I'm not immediately sure. I flip through a few cards. They seem to be donor records, each card noting a person's name, their address, and the history of their giving to the institution. Mrs. Harriet Comstock, 412 Elm Street. Annual gift of $25, 1907. The cards are yellowed and brittle, but they're still legible. Someone made this system, maintained it, used it to keep track of relationships and obligations. Now it's just an artifact, a relic of a different way of doing things. Everything's digital now, databases and spreadsheets. But there's something tactile and human about these cards. The fact that someone physically filed them, pulled them out when needed, made notations by hand. I close the box and note its existence and contents. It's late enough now that I'm starting to think about wrapping up. I've made good progress tonight. Better than I expected. Most of what I wanted to get through has been processed, documented, organized. I stand and stretch again, feeling my spine crack slightly as I arch my back. Then I start gathering up the items I've worked through, stacking them neatly on the table, making sure my notes are clear enough that I'll understand them when I come back tomorrow or the next day. The ledgers stack nicely, their various sizes and colors creating a sort of pleasing pattern. The folders go in a separate stack. The box of index cards sits beside them, everything accounted for. I cap my pen and close my notebook. Tucking the pen inside the wire binding, I pour the last few drops of tea into the sink in the corner of the room, rinse the thermos cup, and screw the cap back on. The lamp on my desk gets switched off first, leaving just the one by the far wall still burning. The room immediately feels different with less light, more shadowy. I gather my things, notebook, thermos, and put them in my bag. Then I walk over to the far lamp and pull the cord, and the room goes dark, except for the faint light from the hallway seeping in under the door and through the small window. I can still see well enough to navigate, the shapes of the shelving units darker against the darkness. At the door, I take one last look back at the room. All those records, all those boxes, all those fragments of institutional memory, sitting quietly in the dark, waiting for someone to return and continue the work of organizing them, preserving them, making them accessible. The work that never really ends, just pauses between sessions. I step into the hallway and pull the door closed behind me, hearing the latch click into place. The hallway is lit by emergency lighting. Dim, but sufficient. My footsteps echo slightly as I walk toward the stairs. The building is still quiet around me, still settling, still breathing its old building breaths. Somewhere above, a door closes. Outside, traffic continues its distant murmur. I climb the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, my bag over my shoulder. At the top, I'll check that the main door is locked behind me. And then I'll head out into the night, into the cool air, toward home and sleep. But tomorrow, or the day after, and there will be more boxes, more ledgers, more folders, more records waiting. The work continues, steady and patient, document by document, hour by quiet hour.